For those of you younger, there was a movie years ago called The Graduate. And it was a big impact movie. And in the movie, Benjamin has graduated and is trying to figure out what to do with his life. And Mr. McGuire walks up to him and says, "I just want to say one word to you, just one word." Benjamin, "Yes, sir." "Mr. McGuire, are you listening?" "Yes, I am." "Plastics." "Exactly how do you mean?" "There's a great future in plastics. Think about it." Will you think about it? Guess what? There was a great future in plastics. We have plastic everything, everywhere. It's killing the whales, but it's making trash collection easier and bagging easier. Plastic was the industry of the future the day that The Graduate came out. Well, I did some books by Alec and a co-author called The Second Machine Age and Machine Platform Crowd. I've recently spoken for a consultant who brings people together, and I have a talk that I call Thinking About the Future. And I bring out ideas from the Second Machine Age and the inevitable, and Thank You for Being Late, and The World is Flat, which is an older one now, and many other books. And so I tweeted Alec Brynjolfsson, the author of The Second Machine Age, and I said, "Here are the books I've read on this. What do I need to read next?" And he said, "Go back and pick up The Industries of the Future by Alec Ross." It came out in 2016. And I did. And I read it. And I liked it. It was a good book. And so I know you're all waiting. What do you write down instead of plastics? Here it is. Cyber security. The industry of the future, where the jobs are going to be and the need is great, is cyber security. Okay, you can leave now, but I'll say more. All right, turn to page 8. We're going to do this one a little differently. On the left, people have always had to adjust their work-life plans to the industries and the geographies that need workers. They move to where the work is, and they develop skills in that work. The world of work has grown ever larger, broader, far stretching. The industries of the future will be different from the industries of yesteryear. Let me say that again. Circle that phrase. The industries of the future will be different from the industries of yesteryear. What will those industries be? How will we get ready? Answering such questions correctly and wisely is the challenge confronting the current era. Now, this is not remotely. There is nothing in this book that is political, but you ought to know that Alec Ross was the head person hired on innovation and technology by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And he went around the world trying to help especially poor developing countries with technology to build their economy better. So there's a quote here about, before going to work for Clinton, I served as the convener for technology and media policy on the Obama campaign. And then my job at the State Department was to modernize the practice of diplomacy and bring new tools and approaches to addressing foreign policy challenges. And so he was, and by the way, the State Department, while he was doing this job, was, quote, the most innovative, friendly culture of any cabinet-level department in the federal government. So this man, I watched him on an interview after I read the book, is an innovation encyclopedia. And he really knows how to think about it. Now, again, we've got the table of contents, and just reading this tells you the book. Here come the robots. Welcome your new job takers and caregivers. Everybody circle the word caregiver. Here come the robots, the caregivers. The coming decade will see societies transform as humans learn to live alongside robots. The future of the human machine. The next development will build on our genetic code. The codification of money, markets, and trust. Is there an algorithm for trust? New ways to exchange are forcing a rewrite of the contact between corporation, citizen, and governments. You all that are older know this. I used to go into a bank inside the building to make a deposit. I walked in and they knew my name. I knew the bank's name. That's not a small thing. And it was human connection. I have been into my bank once in the last year because they called me and said, your card has been compromised. We've canceled it. Come get a new debit card. Believe it or not, that happened yesterday. But all over the world, this is replacing banks. It's breathtaking to read the development of money transfer through phones in the poorest parts of the world. They are leapfrogging banks. So that's a development. The weaponization of code. The world has left the Cold War behind only to enter into a code war. Data, the raw material of the information age. Land was the raw material of the agricultural age. Iron was the raw material of the industrial age. Data is the raw material of the information age. The geography of future markets. World leaders take notice the 21st century is a terrible time. Circle this phrase. A terrible time to be a control freak. Control freak does not work in the industries of the future. And then he says the most important job you will ever have is to help your children get ready for this. We're going to do a little jumping around quickly. Turn to page 2. On the bottom left, what is the point? The industries of the past are being replaced. They are, maybe quite rapidly. What will the industries of the future be? The book points us in possible, likely directions. Why is this book worth our time? We need clarity about what is coming down the road, opportunities and dangers. The book provides clarity. Number 2, we need to know the big picture connected to these industries of the future. The book provides the big picture. Number 3, we need to prepare for the economic disruption and career opportunities of the future. This book provides clarity on these issues also. Now, I've got pages of the best highlights that I highlighted from the book. Look at number 5 at the bottom of page 2. The world in which I grew up, the old industrial economy, was radically transformed by the last wave of innovation. The story is now well worn. Technology, automation, globalization. That's yesterday. Have you been listening to what you do to build a car in America? The parts are made in Mexico, and they are not sent in and storehoused in a warehouse. They arrive at the plant 3 hours before they're needed. Just-in-time inventory. If you shut down the transportation of parts, you shut down the auto industry. That's why the U.S. Chamber of Commerce says we can't close the border, because our cars are built with parts that arrive just in time. All right, turn to page 3. Number 10. Advances in wealth creation will not accrue evenly. Many people will gain. Some people will gain hugely, but many will also be displaced. The next wave will challenge middle classes across the globe, threatening to return many to poverty. The previous wave saw entire countries and societies lifted up economically. The next wave will take frontier economies and bring them into the economic mainstream while challenging the middle classes in the most developed economies. A story from the book and a story from the news. From the book. There was a day, for most of all of the history of automotive taxis, where there was a person who owned the taxi company in Chicago and made a lot of money. And the person who owned the taxi company in Philadelphia and made a lot of money. And New York and made a lot of money. But now the taxis are all owned by a billionaire CEO in Silicon Valley. And so there will not be wealthy taxi owners. It will all go to Uber. Fascinating. Uber and Lyft. And yesterday, Ray Dalio, he wrote Principles which I presented, a billionaire himself. Ray Dalio said, at the moment, capitalism is making a handful of people incredibly wealthy, but it's hurting the average. That's Ray Dalio. He wrote that on LinkedIn on a post himself yesterday. Number 17, rapid progress often comes with greater instability. All right, turn to page 5. Again, I have to go quickly. Number 37. MIT professor Eric Brynjolfsson, that's the one who recommended this book, calls it the great paradox of our era. Productivity is at record levels, innovation has never been faster, and yet at the same time, we have a falling median income and we have fewer jobs, although the jobs are now increasing, but they're not the same kind of jobs. And then turn to page 7, just to reiterate the statement, number 71. World leaders take notice the 21st century is a terrible time to be a control freak. All right, turn back now to page 8. Bottom of the page, so what is coming? And some of it's already here and getting bigger and better. Caregiving robots. This is happening in Japan. Why in Japan? Because they got lots of people living long lives and not many grandchildren. And they have got to invent robots that can pick up somebody and wash their hair and care for them. And so they named one Robina. And they've named the male Humanoid. But they are absolutely experimenting, and there is zero doubt that if Japanese people can make it, it's going to be with robots because of the demographics of Japan. Driverless cars are coming. Personalized designer medicine. There's a big section in this book saying that there will be designer medicine geared to your problem and tackling just the problem inside your body. Excuse me. Billionaire diets. This was fascinating. The author of this book sits down with common people, but also interviews and sits down with billionaires. And let me read the quote, and then I'll tell you what he said. I have found that an accurate measure of someone's net worth can be gauged by what he or she orders at breakfast. A billionaire figures out what to eat to maximize his or her body. And so the billionaire he ate with had a protein drink and blueberries and nothing else. For those of you who ate omelets, I'm sorry to report that. Cyber criminality and cyber threats all around. And he thinks that we are about a decade away from real-time translation, where you will have a gizmo in your ear and you'll be talking to somebody who speaks Mandarin, and the translating technology will be so quick and so sudden that you will hear them in English when they're speaking in Mandarin in the tone of their voice, and vice versa. The other night, I was with a friend. We had a person that we met who was from Vietnam. He pulled out his phone, typed in a phrase to Google Translate, and read her a greeting in Vietnamese. Fascinating. So he says 20 years is going to be better. Turn to page 9. top of the page, much greater crop yield with food creation and delivery. A word about modern tractors. And he says that even the not gigantic multinational corporation, even a small farmer will have a more sophisticated tractor that will, first of all, not need a driver. Number two, will be bouncing off the cloud. And number three, will know what fertilizer to put in this little 10-foot square place to maximize that. It will help the environment and it will increase crop yield. Fascinating. So developments. He said it and now it's happening. Did you know that McDonald's can bring you your order from Uber now? I don't know why you would do that, but you can. And the appification of America and the world, starting with the millennials who are really comfortable with that. All right, about this book. This book is about the next economy. It is written for everyone who wants to know how the next wave of innovation and globalization will affect our countries, our societies, and ourselves. The book explores the industries that will drive the next 20 years of change. Its chapters are built around the key industries: robotics, advanced life sciences, the codification of money, cybersecurity, and big data, as well as the geopolitical, cultural, and generational context out of which they are emerging. Much more change and innovation is coming. We have not seen much yet. Note the booms. India will boom. China will boom. Africa will boom. Pacific-facing countries of South America will boom. We have gone from to. Our most valued commodities have gone from salt and sugar to chemicals and fuels to data and services. Look for openness in the society. Look for signs of empowerment of women. Open governments that empower women will have a better future. I think that's right. Here's some big signals. Japan is building caregiving robots. There is a growing acceptance of blockchain. Bitcoin is using blockchain, but blockchain is a totally trustworthy, reliable ledger that big banks are examining, and he says that's coming down the road. And then he says the cyber attacks we have not heard enough about. He tells the story of how North Korea shut down the computers of Aramco, the largest oil company in the world, Saudi Arabia. And the United States and Israel and China worked together to fix that problem. China worked with the United States against North Korea. And he said, you may not have heard much about it, but China basically said, North Korea, you're not going to do this because this disrupts the flow of economy. All right. An interesting philosophical issue regarding robots. In Japan, they think there is animism that holds both objects and human beings with spirits, and so they're more open to it. In the U.S., we think a robot is the Terminator, so we don't want it. So kind of an interesting philosophical background. Is the singularity really coming? Singularity is when computers surpass human brain capability. Yes, it is. By 2023, according to Victor Venge, or by 2045, according to Ray Kurzweil, he's the one I thought that coined the term singularity, but others say not really. Robots are going to become increasingly human, but the gap between humans and robots will remain for a long time. I don't know the answer to this. He just says those are the options. An economic observation. As soon as the robot is cheaper, the human worker will be replaced. And the robot will be cheaper. That's definite. And so note especially leapfrogging companies where they're using phones for banks. Turn to page 10. An observation from Randy: there will be mistakes in blockchain, in robots, in self-driving cars, with injuries and deaths until there won't. It's really interesting. The machine learning and the deep learning is fixing the problems rapidly. But there will be dangers. Do we want designer babies? And what about the cyber threats? And by the way, anybody in here ever give your money and spit it in the vial for 23andMe? I have. It turns out that the woman who started the company was the wife of Google co-founder Sergey Brin, and they're now selling our DNA to multiple drug companies. The job of the future is the threat of cyber warfare. 5 lessons and takeaways. Number 1, what will we teach our children to get ready for the industries of the future? Hint, coding, big data analysis, but also maybe a return to the liberal arts. I'm a fan of that. Number 2, here are the facts. We're on the road to more and more robots and more automation. And we are on the road to greater and greater breakthroughs with technology in every arena imaginable. Number 3, but in the midst of the breakthroughs, the dangers lurk and will come, including a genuine change in the weapons of war. Code, hacking, cyber warfare. Number 4, explained by Moore's Law, there will be dramatic breakthroughs that bring big, massive change all at once. This is something to understand. It will not be noticeable until it is big, and then it comes all at once. And number 5, the wealth will spread far and wide, but there will likely be greater gaps between the wealthy, the uber wealthy, and the rest than ever before, maybe unavoidably. The industries of the future, I have one word for you, and it's not plastic. Hope you found this useful.